Thank you so much. Thank you. So let me start by sharing our screen so we can get started. It's good to see everyone here for our final training of our series. I appreciate all of you all for those who've submitted some questions on the pre-survey. Definitely working on that. Is my screen okay? Can y'all see my screen? Perfect. All right, so we're here as we've been talking that, as we know, making a mandated suspected child abuse report is not taken lightly. A lot of us, we've had conversations already about reasonable suspicion, but we're not really clear about what happens after the report has been made, the impact the report has on the family, on your relationships. And so today, what I'm hoping you all will leave here is to learn the impact of reporting, to understand what happens after the report has been made, like during the investigative process. And then, of course, learn how clinicians and other supporters can maintain that therapeutic relationship with their clients after a report. So today we'll be going over briefly some things to consider before making a report. We'll be talking about how to specifically make a report. We will touch on the child abuse and neglect investigative process, talking about dispositions, and then we'll really get into the meat of our training today. We'll talk about your role during the child welfare investigations, how to speak to families or if to speak to families, and then, of course, supporting families throughout this process. Now, one of the things that we need to consider and think about as we do this work is our relationships with each other. And so we are having several breakout groups, and our first breakout group is just a teaser of how we'll be working together. Since I've already asked you in your pre-surveys about one thing you would like to get out of the training, I am changing our breakout question. I would like us all to get grounded together in our role of supporting families through this process. So today's question, first breakout question, will be sharing with your group your name, your role in your organization, and why you got into this work. What are some of the reasons, or one of the reason, or a reason why you got into the work? So this will only spend like between 3 to 5 minutes together, just to ask that question, and then we'll come back and continue together.
Welcome back, folks. Folks are trickling in.
Oh, good. Yeah, I had the opportunity. I'll start sharing again. The opportunity to pop into some of the breakout rooms and just listening to, all of the reasons why we got into this work. And so it's yeah. Why did I get into this work? I think I found myself doing a lot of mediation and, like, I don't know, a lot of when I was in young college student, mediating people with like roommate issues. And I'm like, I think I should get paid for this. Um, and so I was kind of naturally drawn uh, to just supporting peace with people. All right. Hopefully you all got to get to know each other a little bit, and as we continue our day. Before making a report, so before we talk about the impact of after making a report, we really need to talk about all of the things that go into before we're even making a report. One of the things is about reflection. A lot of times when we receive reports, we receive information of reports, we some feelings come up. And these feelings could be because of relatability. It could be because we weren't raised that way or we did not experience that. Um, we need to first ground ourselves in, as we're making mandated reports, we're not making reports based on our initial feelings of how that information makes us feel. We are there as adults to support children and their well-being. And first thing is if we're having feelings and reactions, that's where we take pause and not go directly to making a report, but we ask ourselves, are we making a report based on how this information makes myself feel, or am I making this report based on the impact to the child? Another thing to reflect on is bias. Do we have bias? What are our biases? Okay, so we all have bias. We need to always identify, well, what are our bias? And how that, whether it's implicit or explicit, I was raised to think of certain type of people in this way or not. Othering of people, all of these impact on, we need to reflect on before we make a report. Another thing we need to think about before we make a report is clarifying versus investigation. There's a lot of questions about, am I investigating if I ask these questions? We have to get clarifying information in order to determine if we have reached reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion of neglect, as we talked about in the first training, we need to ask some clarifying questions. We can't just get a snapshot of a child, a father hit a child, or even a parent left a child home with siblings. When we're thinking about making a report, we have to think about what impact does it have on the child? Is that parental behavior, will that cause substantial risk of harm to that child? And then we need to consider if we're thinking about liability when we're making a report. Liability reporting is harmful. Our first mandate for making a report is suspected abuse or neglect, not protection of our license or our credential. We all are operating, we all, just listening to why we got into the work, we all operate, the assumption of the law is that we're all operating within our ethical responsibilities. So that includes reporting. So if we're reflective and if we provide clarification, then reporting will not be about liability or not. Big one here, we need to engage and connect with the families that we work with. A lot of the information that we receive that we may need to make a report, we probably have a lot of questions, but sometimes we may be fearful of asking certain questions. However, if we push through that fear and be curious, and engage with that family and connect with that family, then we might be able to provide supportive services to them. We can ask them, well, where do they get services or help already? We can ask them about their familial supports, their community supports, and then offer support, because maybe they'll just tell you how you can be supportive of them. One of the things that I mentioned is our referral statistics. A lot of times people there are questions about, was it wrong with something that I saw? So if they saw something, was I wrong about it? Well, the referral statistics, and these are statewide statistics, but they are pretty consecutive across counties, is that overall in 2022, there were over close to 500,000 referrals, alleged allegations. Of all of those allegations, only 12% were substantiated. In those substantiated, we looked at the categories of people who had rates of substantiation, and we found that law enforcement had one of the highest substantiation rates. So what this means is that when law enforcement called and made a suspected child abuse report, 26% of the time they were substantiated, as opposed to people working in in schools, or therapists or counselors. So what does this mean? This means that a lot of children and families that were investigated by child welfare services didn't need to be investigated. So a lot of times, so we're asking, okay, so how would I know? Well, it goes back to asking, our reflecting, clarifying, and then engaging and connecting with families. If we do these things consistently, we will reduce the numbers of calls to the hotline and investigations that don't need to be investigated. So today we'll be working with one particular scenario, and we'll be talking about this scenario throughout our time together. This scenario will go through the time of determining reasonable suspicion, actually making a report, and how to support the families and the child after a report has been made. So the scenario goes like this. A youth reports to you that their coach has parties at their house where teens are allowed to drink. The youth says that their coach disclosed to them that they are romantically interested in the youth and that they've messed around. The parents do not know, as the child knows that this will make them upset. The student advises that their classmate used to date the same coach too. What, if anything, should you do? So here we'll take some time to go back in our groups and kind of just have a conversation. I think it's in your chat. Oh, good. The slide is in your chat. So the slide is in your chat. So we'll see, what should we do with this information? And I'll be popping in and out of your chat rooms and your breakout rooms to kind of help you. And then we'll have a discussion back in the group. So I'll see you all in your breakout rooms.
All right. Looks like a lot of the folks are coming back in. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Get us back to this. So yeah, y'all are making very I don't think I was able to get to all of the rooms, and I hope throughout the day I'll be able to get through all of the rooms. Um, Does anyone want to go off mute and say what some of the things that came up in their groups? I was
I can
here.
share a little.
Oh yeah, please go on.
I can share a little bit about our group. We kind of mentioned that we would talk with the student and ask them a little bit more questions, specifically around, what age the teens are, that the ones that are participating in the parties, and then also, what was meant when it said like messed around. So what exactly does that all entail? And then also ask around what they mean by date. They mentioned that a classmate dated the coach. So what does that mean for them? Just to get more information about how serious this is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I was thank you. I was purposefully vague in this to see if y'all would catch on to that a couple of things about reflecting about how this made you feel. Clarifying and not investigating. Like how can I get some clarity around this word messing around? Like when and I know some it's like investigating because when we're calling out the suspected child abuse hotline or if we're calling law enforcement, depending on who we're calling, if we're making a call, messing around has probably we have 65 people in the room, probably have that many people. Yes, I see your hand up.
Um, yeah, our group was more talking about the age, right? Meaning to clarify the ages.
Okay.
And then we were talking about the power differential, plural, right? Coach to student, um, in his house versus not, able to buy alcohol versus not. Um, but I think all of us were pretty clear that sounds very reportable. And that we would try to talk to who this other person that dated, quote unquote, this coach was.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
But yeah, I mean, I won't speak for the whole group,
mhm,
but I will say it seems very reportable to me.
mhm, 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 mhm.
We focused on the age of the coach, which I thought was a really great insight
Okay.
because I think when we say the coach has parties at their house, I don't think many of us assumed that the coach might be 19 and the coach might have attended the same high school and the
Mhm,
coach could have dated the friend while he was a senior, right?
mhm,
Which really changes the dynamics
mhm,
in a very different way.
mhm,
So that was really interesting. Sonia from our group brought that up, and it
mhm.
really opened my eyes about like how I completely assumed a power
Right.
dynamic where there might have been actually some really just friendships that changed because his role in the school had changed.
Mhm, mhm. That's a very good point. I'm very um uh I'm very glad that you brought that up because I think when we look at certain scenarios, when we hear certain abuse or neglect, we have a picture in our heads of what it is. So I'm very much to your point. Yes, I see your hand up.
It for me?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, in our group, we pretty much agreed on or we talk about talking with our supervisor superior that how this is gonna go because we do not investigate. So this is suspected things that the professionals on the area will do that,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna see if this will be um with the police to doing something, do their own investigations. So
Yes, yes, and we have to think about like if we have just one small scenario that we do need some clarifying points because making a suspected child abuse report means that a child is at risk of substantial harm, and there we have to clarify as we're moving on to making a report. We need to clarify like who are we making the report to? Who are we making the report to? And if it's something that's reportable and it's true, I am curious to if I put ages on there, if it was the 17-year-old and an 18-year-old, and they're at the the 18-year-old's house, but maybe the 18-year-old, the parent they had liquor there, and what if that was the case? Then would it be a suspected child abuse report? And we do have to talk about because sometimes when we look at suspected child abuse report, we think of, or when we think of a CPS report, it's very narrow to just referring to child welfare, when in actuality, it's a suspected child abuse report that is that you call either law enforcement or child welfare. Now, there are certain organizations that say all cases, all suspected reports, you call child welfare, or and whether or not, because in that scenario, the parents weren't do not know about what's going on. And so I'm even wondering about like at what point are the parents involved in this? That's one thing that I didn't hear, since the parents didn't know about it. How do we engage with parents? How do we engage with parents first in terms of protecting children? Because if this scenario were that they were a 17, 18-year-old, 17 and a half or 18-year-old, and this was going on and the parents didn't know, would we call law enforcement or calling child welfare? And if we're calling child welfare is saying that the parents or the guardians, the parents or the care providers of that child is neglectful or abusive. So making a suspected report, we also need to talk about where are the parents in this? Anybody else have anything before we move on from the scenario? Were there any other points people wanted to make that kind of came out of the group?
I think I just wanted to add that like we are dealing with a teenager in this scenario, and I think that coming from a younger person, I guess, a lot of the times grown-ups are super reactive, and I am a grown-up now, but we're super reactive. And I think it's just a reminder to tread lightly and ask questions, and everything's not black and white, like one of my group members said. So when it comes to things like this, it's just a reminder to take a step back and don't be super reactive, because if you react like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, we have to report it right now, you have to tell me the names, who's going to want to respond positively to a reaction like that, right? So I just wanted to bring that up because we did kind of talk about it in my group.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much. A lot of it, and which is why when we're talking about like before making a report, one of the first things we do is reflect on how do we feel. And I think we got a lot of reactions about how we felt. And I don't know if we all first, before we jumped into action, jumped into what we're going to do, said to ourselves, wait a minute, how does this report make me feel? What are some things that are coming up for me right now? How do I deal with that first before I go into the steps of possibly problem solving? Yeah, I didn't hear us talking about reflecting on self. That's the first thing that we need to do to calm.
I think a couple of people in the chat and also for myself, I think we saw like the word coach
Mm-hmm.
and immediately, I mean, yes, we do, you know, there are coaches like on basketball teams and things like that at high schools and whatnot that are younger or of the same age. But someone had mentioned like the power differential, or you know, like there is a line between someone that is considered a coach versus somebody that is You know, that's versus a player or a teenager that's on the team. There's a difference because there's an authority figure there. And I think that at least for me, what's coming up for me is I see the word coach and I think, okay, there's a line there you don't cross. Which would make me want to question things more.
Cool. Yes, yes, definitely. When something comes up for us, that is, I love that words. It makes me want to question things more. Like, absolutely. Like, this scenario had a lot of gaps on purpose, because it's really about challenging you to see what comes up with this. There's no when we're thinking about like an emotional impact of is this something the youth wanted to be involved in, not wanted to be involved in? Like, it's not really clear. Why would the parent be upset? I would be curious about that. Sarah.
Yes, hi. I just have a quick question about, you make the distinction on top, suspected child abuse report versus CPS report. Like, what's the difference between the two was my first question before even going into the discussion.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you asked that. So, a suspected, so a lot of us will use the word CPS report, but that's not an accurate report. That's not an accurate statement. An accurate statement is a suspected child abuse report, because in California, 2 organizations receive these reports, both law enforcement and child welfare. So a lot of times we say CPS report, and that just tells us, oh, we call CPS for everything. However, no, sometimes you call law enforcement. And this may be a situation, if we were to make a suspected child abuse report, we would be calling law enforcement to report this, versus calling child welfare, where we're reporting against the parent or the guardian. Thank you. I'm glad that you asked that.
Wait, so to confirm, so a suspected child abuse report would involve a law enforcement
and child welfare.
And child welfare.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So CPS, I should put like a line through CPS report. We should all call it a suspected child abuse report. Kim.
Thanks, Colette, for helping to clarify this. So if we have asked the more questions and we've determined that there is in fact suspected child abuse here, these are minors and the coach is an adult, and there's clearly messing around means something that's not appropriate. So
something that's reportable.
Right. So whatever, we've kind of asked the questions and determined that. You had mentioned something about the fact that the parents are unaware. I wouldn't think it would be up to those of us receiving this information to take the step of reaching out to the parents before making a suspected child abuse report. That seems like that would be, if we don't already have contact with them, like I'm hearing this over here in this setting that has nothing to do with the parents, and I don't have contact with the parents, I don't know the parents, on the helpline, right? I'm talking to somebody else. I may not actually have contact with the parents. So I guess I'm trying to understand, are you suggesting that we should try and reach out to the parents before making a suspected child abuse report?
Well, what I'm saying is that, well, given like that decision tree, I'm saying I don't know if when I wrote this scenario, I didn't think that there may be a report. So because maybe there's nothing there to make a report. And I would and we're going to be walking through the rest of our training is like, how do we talk to parents about this? How do we engage with a parent and a youth around a youth saying that they don't want us to give out this information if we have a relationship with them? Like, right, if we don't have a relationship, if we don't know them, and all of the things, it's, you know, a 13-year-old child and a 25-year-old coach, and that messing around is something that's reportable.
Right.
And we don't have a rapport with the family, then we may not tell the parents. However, if we're that child's therapist and that child is saying like, and you may have told that child, I'm going to call child welfare, I'm going to call the police, and that child, you may have to do something to support that child with informing their parent that this has gone on. So that's the meat of the conversation. Like, yes, you still maybe before, after, during that time, you're having a conversation with that family, with that child around your report, without hoping not fracturing the relationship if it's an ongoing. So yeah, we have, given our roles, we're going to have all these different situations as to how would we fill in the blanks, how would we support. Emily and then Annabelle.
Yes, I just need a clarification. So when I read the scenario, it says the teens. When I hear teens, I'm assuming they're younger than 21. So even if the coach was 19, say that scenario, he was 19, how's he purchasing the beer with, he's not 21 yet. And so then this is teens, so I'm assuming that they're younger. I'm not assuming that they're over 21. So that's the part that I'm kind of wrestling with right now.
Yeah, no, this is a scenario where we're gonna wrestle with, just so we can, so on purpose. And all of these, we have all of these various options and ways in which of how to intervene. And I'm just wanting to get you all to think about, what are some things that I need to get cleared up? How would I support this child, this youth, this family? What if you were the parent's therapist? Annabelle.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my thought was pretty similar to the person that just spoke before me. So for me, like my initial reaction would be to contact authorities to make a report because there is alcohol being distributed to minors. And in my opinion, like the potential messing around, that's something that could be resolved and should be addressed like with those authorities. But to me, the fact that you have minors consuming alcohol, that alone is a huge risk to their safety for various reasons. Even if the sexual, rumors with the coach aren't true, it's unsafe to have, groups of teenagers consuming alcohol. That's, to me, like, I would think that that's reportable off the bat, just that alone.
Yeah, and this training is really about like, how do we talk to families after a report? Like, how do we engage with them, like while we're making a report, to support them? So maybe I think less about like, is this reportable or not, and more about like, okay, what do we do with this youth, and how do we support this family? So yes, and I would still, if I was at high school counselor receiving this information, or a VP hearing this information, how would how would I give this information to the parent? If I'm wanting to have this ongoing relationship and support with them. Sometimes our organizations and our communities are small, that will be seeing a parent, and we have this information, and we could engage with them around this and support them. This child could have a substance use issue. They could be failing in school. There could be so many ways in which we can support families. The parents say that the parent doesn't even know. So when I think about safety of the child, I'm thinking about like, the people who raised this child should know what's going on. Yes, so we kind of talked about this. We talked about our CADMA requirements, like what is sexual abuse, uh, contributing to a delinquency of a minor. We do need to understand that also there are some employer protocols around calling law enforcement. I know a lot of y'all were like, yes, I would call law enforcement. I would call law enforcement. Well, there are some protocols that say you only call law enforcement and when there is like substantial risk of physical harm to a child. So even though here we're saying that, no, this is a call to law enforcement because for all of these reasons, sometimes our employers have us call child welfare to make this report. And then we're making a report of suspected child abuse to child welfare, and they will be, child welfare will, if they deem it as an investigation, they would be going out to the parents and saying, parent, are you being neglectful for having your child do X, Y, and Z? So that's one of the reasons why another reason we need to be clear when we receive information. Who do we call? Do we call law enforcement or child welfare, which is why it's a suspected child abuse report, because we have options of calling. All right. So speaking of options of calling, let's talk a little bit about the investigative process. So given that scenario, which that scenario we'll be using today, given that scenario, once you call law enforcement, or if you have an organization where you cannot call law enforcement and you call child welfare, child welfare and law enforcement must cross-report all of their all of the calls that they receive. It's a state requirement that they cross-report, and also that they make a determination. Will law enforcement investigate? Will child welfare investigate? Is this a crime, or are we saying that parents are being neglectful in their situation? If there's an investigation from law enforcement, a lot of times they may have child welfare stand down and wait for law enforcement to complete their investigation, or vice versa. Law enforcement will stand down so child welfare will complete their investigation. There are definitely situations where law enforcement and child welfare both investigate at the same time, but do parallel investigations. Some of the questions that came up as we were preparing for this training is why we choose 10-day and why child welfare chooses 10-day investigations versus immediate investigations. Well, it depends on several things. It depends on if there's injury, what type of injury, how substantial that injury is. It may be based on forensic issues, like if there's bruising, an immediate child welfare will go out so they can document the bruising. If there's like no parent or guardian, or sometimes in the hospital, if there is close to discharge, that's another reason for an immediate assignment. We see a lot of 10-day assignments with chronic issues. This scenario also may be a 10-day assignment, depending on if there's a protective adult in the home. Again, this would also, when we're asking like, well, would we tell a parent before or after a report? Well, if a parent knew that something was happening, or that their child was at risk of these various things, and they were being protective, then that does impact how soon child welfare and even law enforcement go out. So all of those things matter in terms of how CPS and law enforcement develops their timelines. Sometimes the investigative process, there a lot of times we're talking not just to the youth and the parents, but to collaterals. A lot of questions are asked of families that consist of substance abuse issues, criminal issues, also asking about various risk factors, if they have supportive services, resources, what are their family strengths. Child welfare really asks about parenting practices. What are the parenting practices of that family? That helps investigators have an understanding of the knowledge of child development of children, how parents receive supportive services, if they receive supportive services, various things, investigations, child welfare investigations, law enforcement investigations, though are meant to support families to make sure that there's not abuse and neglect. It's very traumatizing for families to have it's very traumatizing to for families to receive investigations, to have child welfare come to their home. So it is one of the things that families do not forget. And so it is about how we can be very thoughtful to families. And sometimes families felt like I was a child abuse investigator my earlier career, and I remember talking to one family, to one mother, and I remember her saying how upset she is that every time she goes for help or support with her help or support in the community, not too long after there is an investigator knocking on her door. There are various dispositions of the investigative process. If the criteria for dispositions are as follows. Briefly, substantiated dispositions means that they found evidence that abuse or neglect occurred, that it was not an accidental injury, and it met the criteria of that specific category. Inconclusive means that the investigator wasn't able to get clear indication that abuse or neglect occurred. However, something did happen. A lot of times we get inconclusive because it says, yes, something happened. However, it didn't meet the threshold of a substantiation. So there's a lot of gray area there. And unfounded means when no abuse or neglect has occurred. This could possibly be when we're talking about that scenario that we're using, where child welfare was called, and we went and there was an investigation, and the child abuse investigator found that the parent didn't know about it, and once they found out about it, they were being supportive, they were being protective, they got whatever resources and supports that they needed for their child. That would be an unfounded situation. There are some questions. I put a question here. There's a lot of questions, but I put questions here in terms of why don't we hear back from a CPS regarding the outcome of a report. Investigators are to tell mandated reporters the outcome of their report after they write their investigation up, they write their report up, it gets approved by their supervisor. Now what I'm hearing is that mandated reporters are also supposed to be getting information back if your report did not rise to the level of an investigation. It is important for us all to know, like, are we making the correct reports? Was this reportable or not? So that's one of the ways in which I know child welfare is working on getting that to you. However, as a mandated reporter, whenever you're making a suspected child abuse report and you're calling the CPS hotline, you can always call back and ask and say, I made this report about this child. What happened? And they're able, as mandated reporters, we're able to receive that information. All right. I'm seeing some things in the chat. Oh yeah, Kim, go ahead. Kim, and then yeah.
Great,
ahead.
thank you. So I just wanted to go back to the statuses, et cetera, and you were referring back to the scenario
Yeah,
and how, and I just want to make sure I understood you correctly, that if there was found to be the inappropriate behavior that was in fact, reportable abuse, and once the parents were an investigation started, parents were contacted, they didn't know about it, they're acting to, protect the child, get therapy, whatever is needed.
all the things.
Why would that be unfounded versus substantiated? But there's a, you know what I mean? Like because the abuse is substantiated, but now the parents are aware, so they're doing the right things.
Yeah.
The abuse still happened.
I love that question. Oh, that's a great question, because when child welfare does investigations, their investigation is saying, is the parent abusive or neglectful? And that's why it's unfounded in terms of the parents not being abusive or neglectful. Let's take the scenario and saying that the police are investigating and they arrested somebody, a community member, this coach. That coach will get charged, but in terms of child welfare history, it's not against, because child welfare history is only against the parents or the guardians.
Right.
So
So the distinction being from a child welfare perspective, since the parents aren't the accused or the alleged abusers, they're doing what they're supposed to do. Although law enforcement may still be pursuing the coach in this case as a criminal thing, but as far as child welfare is concerned, they're done.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes. Which is also why I put that in there, because we need to make the distinction that if we call child welfare and I see your hand, when you call child welfare and you're reporting a community member, you're making history for the family. And that's opposite of what we're trying to do. We're still trying to protect this child, but not create child welfare history for the family.
Yeah, I'd be calling law enforcement, not child welfare in this scenario. But yes, I hear you.
Exactly. So when we're talking about impact of reporting, we need to know, who should we call? We're only calling child welfare if we're worried about the parent or the guardian. And if something is happening like this scenario, we're calling law enforcement. They accept suspected child abuse reports, which is why it's not a CPS report. Great question. Thank you. Okay. Deborah, I see you.
I think Sarah had her hand.
Sarah, sorry. I'm seeing the name. So sorry, Sarah and then Deborah.
Okay, my question has to do with the follow-up. So I'm from Asian Health Services, community health agency, and a lot of times we co-manage with other care providers, for example, with the hospital. And my question has to do with, let's say there's a child and someone from the other team suspected similar things, and they're the ones who make CPS report. And we as our provider wants to find out. I think he was told that when he called to find out the result of it, was told that the outcome can't be shared with him because he was not the one to submit CPS. So I was wondering about that. If they're
That's
part of the care team, but not the immediate person who filed it, can we be updated on the outcome?
No, it's only because child welfare has to protect confidentiality, and child welfare doesn't know who's on the team, who's doing this or that. They don't have that documentation at that point in the child welfare process. So at the point of hotline investigation, that is only the mandated reporter who made the report can call and get that information. Yeah.
Quick follow-up to that then, is our provider able to discuss the outcome with the one who did file, or would they be breaking confidentiality?
Well, that would be up to y'all's, I'm sure you have your own internal confidentiality agreements in terms of how you share information. You would follow those policies.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, now Deborah, did you still have
So
a
my-
question? Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is also around follow-up. It's so if you make, going back to the scenario that you told us about, so if we call law enforcement or the agency calls law enforcement and talks to and says there's an issue here,
Mhm.
are they held to the same, like, do we find out what happened if we call?
So, law enforcement, yes, a lot of times, law enforcement will reach out to the reporter to get more information. So some of the things that you'll see here that you segued into this, my next point. Perfect, thank you. So, child welfare investigations, law enforcement investigations, a lot of times they will be unannounced. They will show up to your facility, your organization, where they think that child is, unannounced. It could be the school. So both law enforcement and child welfare officials all have statewide jurisdiction within their counties, throughout the state, but within their counties or within their city jurisdiction, has jurisdiction to interview. It is best for investigators to interview children and youth away from the families, away from their homes. So definitely when you see child welfare, when you see law enforcement and they want to interview a youth, find space for them to do so. They'll come to community members. They'll ask for collateral. They'll do a lot of collateral contacts in terms of maybe even asking who's on that, asking for that child's emergency card. Subpoenas. Mandated reporters, we are at risk, if I'm using that word correctly, to be subpoenaed to court. Our reports to law enforcement and our reports to child welfare start the ball rolling. And a lot of times judges, courts, attorneys, depending on how the case goes, will want to know, where did the investigation begin? It begins with us as mandated reporters. So this is why it's important to document. And there are different ways that, that we all document, not just the report, like, because we have how we document the report. There's the 11166, there's the SCAR form that we complete when we make suspected reports. I'm saying document your relationship with that family, document your relationship with that client. And what we'll be talking about is documenting on how you supported the family after a report has been made. So here we are. So some of the things that we need to consider before our next breakout room or breakout time. being thorough and thoughtful before making a report. As we looked at our scenario, there were a lot of gaps of information that were there. How can we be thorough about getting everything that we need if we're going to make a report to law enforcement or child welfare? It's very important for law enforcement and child welfare how old the children are. What's the age difference of the coach and the youth? Like that, those have legal ramifications in the criminal process. So this is why these things that are that it's not like we just jump straight into the report, because sometimes a coach and student relationship may not be, if it's messing around, may not be illegal. If the coach and the student are both underage drinking, then we're needing to report to the parents, talk about getting those parents involved. And those are the ones who we need to quote unquote hold accountable. So even with this information about messing around and underage drinking, there's still clarifications that we need to get from this report. Communication. I really liked hearing as I was popping into the groups about, reminding not just from at the onset of our work with clients and the people that we're working with, that we're mandated reporters, that we have limits to our confidentiality. Yes, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Colette. I'm I'm wanting to dive a little bit deeper into the folks who said the distinction that's important for me is the fact that they're a coach, not that they could be 19 and the student could be 17, or that they could be 18 and then the student can be 17. Because for me, there's a huge difference. And I'm just wondering like what the difference is between that, why it would hold so much weight for someone, the fact that they have a title coach and that makes a power differential versus the age thing. Can people who spoke about that jump in and tell me about their perspective? Is that okay, Colette, for a brief minute?
Sure. If they're willing to share, yeah.
I was one of the ones that brought up the idea of a coach as sort of a flag for me. And part of the reason I'm concerned about that is I'd want to, of course, as we said with every other item, in the scenario given to us, is we would need to ask more questions. I'm concerned about coercion. I'm concerned about favors. I'm concerned about more playtime, in a particular game, or referrals to other coaches at college, all the kinds of things that could happen that might lend itself to coercing a relationship rather than engaging in one that was otherwise appropriate given the age span.
Thank you for that. Jamila?
Yeah, I think part of my concern, and thank you, Philip, for sharing that, is that once we make a call to CPS, if we are at the school, right, especially if we're placed at the school, we have direct contact with the coach. We understand different things about the culture. There's actually more information and more interventions that we have access to than what a CPS investigation might provide. So I think I think for me, the concern is if we have those kinds of concerns, it's a really great opportunity for the student to define that for us. And so if in the example, the coach is a 19-year-old and went to the high school, maybe junior and senior year, and graduated and is now at a local community college and is coaching, and this kid might have been popular or might have parents that have inappropriate boundaries. Is this a teaching opportunity where we get to say, hey, John, you are now an adult role. these are new expectations for you. We are writing you up. And if we see this behavior again, you will be terminated because we do not allow these behaviors on campus. And I think we have a history of believing that if we observe something, we need to make a CPS call. But if we observe something, we need to intervene. And I think that's where I continue to struggle, is that sometimes we defer our interventions that are accessible to us as providers, and we wait for CPS to do something when they have less access to the information than we have and the ability to intervene.
Mhm. Yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I'm looking at like Susan's chat in the comment in the chat in terms of, you know, clarifying and doing some actions, you know, even before CPS, just to see before law enforcement. So I see a couple of hands here. So who was first? Denise? I think you were first.
Okay. Hi. Can we agree to disagree? I
But
agree.
no one's
Okay,
right. We're all right. We're all correct here. We're all in a learning environment. We're right. We're
Great.
all learning. Definitely, this is not about that. But go ahead, Denise.
Okay.
I'll say yes to that.
So with the scenario that we have, is a youth. We don't know what age is the child and all that. So how can they elaborate all that?
Yeah.
What they're seeing or how they're understanding. So that's one thing. But if they're the same age, then yeah, definitely will be more questions. But for me, the difference will be is that if it's a child in a home that is, you know, the parents are drinking or the kids don't have food and things like that, we can work with them and bring other resources. I work in Marin County, and in here the Children and Family Services, formerly known as CPS, work with the police. So all those things, and they meet regularly. So, and also we meet with the Center for Domestic Peace. Is so it's for families with domestic violence. So yeah, it is easy to jump into conclusions that, yeah, oh, this is happening or this is true. But I, as the person who heard it from this child, yes, I will need to call the parents and we can together be there. I'm not going to interview the child without the parents. So the parents there are going to make the decision to report either to the police, or because we don't know if this is happening at the moment or it happens on certain days of the week, whatever hours. So the CPS, the suspected child abuse report is sent, the call is made, the report is sent, and they're gonna find out if it is, what they're gonna follow up on. They follow up with the parents, they follow up with the child, and they do go to the schools, and depending on the age of the child too.
Yeah.
But if they go accompanied by, if it's the child is a female, they will go with a female social worker or a police that is as a female. So it's less intimidating. So, and they prefer to do it with the parent who's there, unless it is, they have to do with a lot of neglect and sexual abuse and all that. So, yeah, so, but for this scenario, I will, yes, meet with the parents, but I will not be investigating the case because of the coach is part of the school system where I work, you know? So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Elaine.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I think, you know, just for like clarifying purposes, when I saw the word coach, to me, that's along what comes up for me is, it's along the same line as teacher, student, patient, doctor. Like we're seeing a lot of these, types of, there are some relationships that may not be able to blossom, I guess, due to certain like rules or policies and whatnot. So, I agree with, I think it was Mr. Evans, that all those things come up for me. Like if we are looking at someone that's they're in a teaching capacity at a high school, they are a teen, we already know this, so impressionable as well. I would worry that yes, they are utilizing, trying to get more playtime, trying to get more, depending on what they're coaching, what are their, is there like a service that they're expecting in return? There's just a lot of things that come up. And there's obviously some of it is me and my own bias, I guess, that I'm just like, these are all the things that are ticking off in my head that I'd want to know more about. Like, well, why did you decide to get into this relationship? And, like what's going on? And, so I'd want to just ask more questions, because I feel like if the coach is in a position to be able to, to empower others or to encourage people to do things, and they're a coach, right? They're there at the high school. And I don't know, I just feel like the relationship is just different.
Yeah, and we in the absence of information, we fill in the blanks, and that's why I wanted this scenario, because we need to be careful about filling in the blanks, because we don't know. And I think we all a lot of us went to created our own story. If I gave you a breakout room and I said, okay, well, fill in the blanks to this story, I would have a whole book about what was going on. And so, and unfortunately, that's what we do when we make a report. And that's what I'm saying. That's where we need to, like, before we even get to after a report, we need to kind of check ourselves at that point when we're receiving these informations. How many blanks are we filling that we're just assuming all of these things without asking clarifying questions? We have to engage, we have to communicate, we have to be curious. So we need to be thorough and thoughtful before making a report. In terms of communication and curiosity, we have how do we have to think about, like, how did y'all react to this information? Like, notice your reactions. Oh, go on, Jamila. Sorry about that.
No. I just wanted to share, like when I was in my breakout group, the first thing I said is we're calling the police right away. I think the thing that I realized was there could be something, and I think we get tripped up on investigation. So like I appreciate that there are some things that are clarification and are not investigation. So the only reason I've been talking about the age difference is not that in 90% of the cases where somebody says that a staff member was being inappropriate with them, that staff member is often going to be a 17-year-old teacher's assistant. I was just saying that if we're looking at what questions we didn't ask, that was something I didn't ask. So I totally get that often we are going to ask a few clarifying questions and we are going to find this is really reportable. There's a reasonable suspicion. I have significant concern. But I brought this up because, yeah, there were questions around age that I just assumed. And so I think that's the piece, is I'm not saying that anytime a kid reports something, I need to then do an investigation. But yes, I need to make sure that I'm not making assumptions that are within my reach and within my scope of work with the child to be able to better clarify.
We tend to fill in the blanks. And so it's sometimes as professionals, as us doing the work that we do, we may not want to say, I don't know. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Like, so, and that's where I'm really, that's where my push is. If y'all didn't get anything out of from me during these 3 sessions, it's really to check ourselves and to ask ourselves, like, what's going on for us. So I see a question, I see my name in it. So it says, I hear Colette, correct me, Colette, if I'm missing it, saying while there is a legal time frame to report, there's also time to slow down, think it through, and consult and act purposefully rather than as a reaction. 100% yes, yes, yes. Our timing of making a report does not start until after we've determined reasonable suspicion, not before. So as we're developing reasonable suspicion, there's no time clock ticking. Once we have that clarifying thing, at that point, we have immediately or as soon as possible to call, and then 36 hours to do submit our written report. But up until the time we're gathering information, we're trying to clarify, that our time frame does not start. Very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Communication and curiosity. I'll add clarity. Communication, curiosity, and clarity. So just add that to your PowerPoint. Engage and offer supportive services. I really liked as I was going through the breakout rooms about empowering your clients. And in this scenario, oh, I think we're gonna get here. In this scenario, it's like, okay, so how do we support families? How do we speak to families, parents, or youth? I would like, Catherine, how many breakout rooms do we have? I would like half of the breakout rooms to figure out, like, how would we talk to this youth about making a report, and the other half, how would we talk about parents? Do we have it? Can we split them up that way? Maybe the odd groups, the breakout rooms with odd numbers, y'all will talk about the parents, and the breakout groups with the youth or with even will talk about the youth. So if you're in 2, 4, 6, your youth, 1, 3, your parents. So let's get back in our breakout groups and talk about, like, given now all that we know, whether we decide to make a report or not, we're past the point of whether we're deciding to make a report or not. Either way, we have this information and we're figuring out how do we still stay connected with either our parents or our youth. And let's spend some time doing that.
All right, looks like all are back in the main room, Colette.
Great, thank you so much. The discussion was lively in the rooms that I was able to attend. Would like to get just briefly some feedback on how would we approach parents? How would we engage parents in this conversation? How do we pull them in to this? Anyone want to share?
In our group, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to kind of start things off, one of the ideas that I proposed and we thought about in our group is that we have to hold in mind the same kinds of tendencies to fill in the gaps when we're presenting information to the parents. And we also have to think about how do we come across as we are approaching them. What might we unintentionally be communicating to the parent about, in my case, a white person in a position of power who's coming to them with concerns. What is their prior experience with interfacing with systems, with interfacing with folks who may or may not be quite different from who they are culturally, racially, ethnically. So that's some of my work to like think about how to approach them and what might come up before I'm even in front of them.
Thank you. And Philip, I saw you were going off mute.
Yes. Part of what came up in our group was that I mentioned that since the youth was the young person was the one in front of us, that I would first ask, what does it mean when the parents get upset? How would I know they were upset? What would I see? What would be happening? Just to get an idea if it's actually safe to bring in the parents at this point for that person in front of me, that young person. Assuming it is, then depending on my role, I might ask parents to come in. I might ask into my session, into a parent-teacher conference, whatever the appropriate setting would be, and encourage a conversation about what has happened, and remind the parents right from the get-go that their child did what, I would say this if I thought it was appropriate at the time, but did what you raised them to do. They told a responsible adult, and here we are talking about it. So good on you for doing this. And now we have to shift our focus to helping support your child. I elicit information from them about how to do that. In our conversation in our group, we also mentioned the parents' experience with the system, as it were, whether it's police or CPS and the whole thing, or even the system that I happen to be working in, a school or an agency.
Yeah, those are really good points. A lot of times also we have to also support parents through possible feelings of guilt. They may, what if they had this is a team that they wanted their children to be on, that they pushed their child to be on, that they even may have forced that you have to be on this team to do this sport. So we also need to, even if it's not within our role, offer supportive resources to parents who may be feeling like, what did I do wrong in this? Those are really good. Anybody else has other thoughts on how they would approach the parents? What if the coach was a family friend? Right, yeah.
I think we talked about this a little bit. Again, it would also depend on the role. Like, am I the child's therapist? Am I a teacher? Am I like whatever? But assuming parents are supportive and they want to take care of their child and they're not a safety concern themselves, right?
Right.
The parent caregiver is going to have some space separate from the child to process this information. If there was some sort of sexual abuse, what have you. So I'd want to provide that space if it was within my role to separately meet with them. Let me answer your questions. What do you need to be able to support your child? Because if they can't take it in and you can't fill their cup, so to speak, then they're not going to be able to take care of their child around this. So I try and find, what do they need? What resources, if it's not me, like if it's not my role, where can I hook you up to get the support you need so that you can then be there for your child? And then let's talk about what kind of supports your child may need and how can you remain open to them, because there may be more that hasn't been shared yet. Oftentimes there is, right? So
there is, yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, for the youth, quickly, briefly, how are we having the conversation? Are we having this conversation? I know in some breakout groups, there's also this question, or should I even tell? Like, what if I don't tell, or should I tell the youth that they're making a report? And if we're not telling, and if we're still working with that youth and we don't say we're making a report, how will we engage with them? How can we authentically and continue to engage with them if we don't say that we made a report? Or how do we engage with them authentically after they made a report and they're like, you told all of my business? And and so that's why when we were talking about this, we're looking at, yes, we're talking about after a report has been made. And I'm hoping that you all can see that the work happens all the way through this process. From the time that we're engaging and getting connected with the people that we're working with, all the way through after we're fulfilling our mandate. So we're running out of time. We've had so much time like talking and I love it. It's been great. And we're getting close to that end. So instead of doing a breakout group, we're going to be putting this in the chat instead. So thinking about if you were all here for our before reasonable suspicion training, did our mandated reporter training, and now we're wrapping our impact after reporting. I want you to kind of just sit a minute and think. First off, you all have had 6 hours with me over this past month. And so given all of our discussions, the information about all the things we need to consider before reasonable suspicion, looking at the impact or all of the indicators of report. And now that we've spent some time here together in groups and collectively talking about the impact after the report, I'm in the chat. Three top takeaways. I know there's like maybe a lot, but maybe 3 things, and we can all read and review our chat together and see what are 3 things, top 3 takeaways that you can integrate in your work right now. And as we're doing that, I'll do our little wrap up. So what does this mean? We're gonna have our 3 takeaways. My first takeaway A is check myself with the field when I receive the information. Yes, take a step back. I love it. Oh, time starts ticking after reasonable suspicion. Reconsider feeling in the blanks. Know yourself. Know your community resources, know what the indicators of abuse are. Remember, be reminded that poverty, lack of resources, lack of access is not neglect. Be curious, be courteous, be courageous, and be clear. Thank you all so much for being here with us. I appreciate you all. And are there any lasting questions? I'm so glad to hear that where people are still putting things in the chat. Continue to do that so we can all see. And yeah, are there any questions, comments before we wrap up? I hope
I'd
you
just like to thank you for the great presentation. I just jumped in this one. I didn't get the other 2 sessions. My coworker, like when I saw her on the calendar, I go, I want this. And she sent me your info, but great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very helpful.
Yes. Thank you all.
Now, will all 3 recordings be available for like going back?
2 of the 3 are.
Oh, they are already.
Yeah, 2 of the 3 are. So Catherine will let us know, but they'll be on the first 5 training. They have a training database, so we'll have a recording of this one and the before reasonable suspicion.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. These were very, very helpful. Yeah, there's so much, usually like the trainings that I've gone through have been like very basic and, you know, last a couple of hours, but going from beginning to end has been just really awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much for this collaboration, Colette. We've come a long way, so I'm very grateful to have you partner with us again and for all these 3 sessions. And so I also want to say thank you to everyone for their for engaging in conversation, and we really, really appreciate it. And thank you for your time, and hope to see you in future trainings. Again, the link to materials and handouts will be sent to you for all 3 sessions, but only the videos of part 1 and part 3 session will be available on our YouTube channel. So you're welcome to check that out. Again, thank you folks, and you guys have a nice day.
Thank you so much. You all take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.